Hi viewers, I'm just going to do this video on a cheap printing press off eBay. This is a 4-colour, 4-station setup. The instructions are very basic, very hard to sort of know exactly how to put it together. So the first thing that I did was separated all my hardware. I sort of worked out logically, so here I've got 4 lots of 6 Allen bolts. And these components here which hold the t-shirt platens onto the arms of the machine have got 6 bolts, so I'm assuming that that's where they go. So one other key thing I've noticed with these bearings, it's probably a bit hard to see on camera, but you've actually got 4 of them. If you look real closely, the angle of this bearing is actually angled one way. To exaggerate, they're sort of angled like that as they screw onto this plate here. First thing to do is separate them, find your 4 that are all the one way and find the 4 that are the other way. The other thing too is this little piece here with the 2 little grub screws in it, that goes to the inside. So yeah, basically separate all your different angled ones out. As you can see from the angle, like once again I'm going to exaggerate, the angle of the holes are angled like so. So get your corresponding bearings sorted out. So just to further highlight my point about these being different, so if I put this one on here, so you can see that on this side it's hitting, but back out here it's kicked it out the other way. So that's that side one. This other one, flip it upside down, you can see it's the reverse, so that end there is closer, this end here is kicked away. So you've got a little Allen screw and a nut there for holding these bearings down. Also with these bigger bolts, you've got 4 here with the nuts on them. These are like a stopper bolt. This nut is the lock nut, so once you get it tensioned down, you lock that nut down into place. So we've got these components here, so each one of these goes like so. So just one thing I've noticed, I've been putting these on. I have been putting on, so the bolt up through the bottom, then a washer and then the nut. But if you look at the nut, it's got this grooved section there which is designed to bite into the material and hold it from unscrewing. So I think the correct way is to put the washer on the bottom. So poke that up through from the bottom, sit that down on top and then just put your nut on. So you've got these M8 bolts with the sticky pads that you stick on. They're the ones that go down in here for your stopper. 4 of them. So you've got these other ones, the bigger bolts, which are also the same length as these ones here that mount these components on. So these ones here, Allen screw, a washer and a nut, and these are for holding your legs on. These ones here that screw directly into this middle section, they don't have any nuts. These little short ones with a washer and a nut. So you've got one here, these hold the clamps onto your arms here. These ones here, the darker ones, they're shorter, they're for your eye bolts, as you can see here. So that's all your components. One thing I will say is you've got all these different adjustments, like you've got a little bit of play in all these brackets. You've got play side to side here on this shaft until you tighten them up in there, so you've got all that adjustment. You can also adjust this here at the base, left and right, you've got a little bit of play there, and you've also got adjustment here. So I just want to take you through the order in which I would recommend doing it. So the first step would be to fit all your eyelets, all these little stopper bolts. Fit all your left hand side ones, or vice versa, do all your right ones first. Fit all them, and the reason I say do that first is because this is light, you can lift it up and get underneath it if you need to do these nuts up. Put these eyelets on. So you've got your chrome ones here which are for your bearings. The darker, shorter ones, they're for these eyelets. So if we look at a blank one here, so you've got one there in the center for your stopper bolt, two here for your bearings either side, and then you've got the next one either side. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the one either side of those is where you're going to put one of these. So when you're putting these eye bolts on, just be aware that each eye bolt is designed to have two springs on it, and make sure that they're aligned, so straight line between those two holes. So just a tip, when you're tightening these up, you can put a heavy duty Allen key or a heavy screwdriver or something in there to hold it. So these stopper bolts which go in there, these holes are threaded, but there's paint build up in there and they're actually quite hard to get started. So I'm fortunate enough to have a tap and die set, and it's the M8 1.25. I'm just going to tap them out. I'll show you the results. So that's the one I've cleaned up. If you have a look at these other ones, you'll see all the paint still in there. So this is the one that I've tapped out. As you can see, it goes in straight away. These other ones, can't get the bolt to start. Here's the particles out of the hole that I tapped out. So you can see it's quite bad. I feel sorry for anyone that doesn't have a tap, that's unable to tap that hole out. Because I've tapped these out, these are a little bit loose and there's no lock nut supplied. So last time I went to the hardware store I got some M8 nuts. So I'm going to screw these in down to the right height, and then from the bottom I'm going to put a lock nut on. I could actually do it from the top as well. Might make it easier to adjust it, but anyway. Just one other thing too, before you put these on, I would advise unscrewing these out, just so that you've got clearance to get the arm in. It's just going to be easier to unscrew these out, or you can move them around, than to do it when it's on there. The other thing I would do pretty early on is check all these little gates here. If you have a set square like this, obviously while these are all apart, check the angle and make sure that those little tags there are at 90 degrees to this part. If not, you might need to get on there with a big shifting wrench and bend it, or put it in a vise and bend it. Just be careful you don't break it off. Bolt all these left hand side ones on, go around, bolt that one on. Don't tighten these up too tight yet until you get everything in place. See how these are functioning, whether they line up. You might need to adjust them once everything's assembled. Make sure that that little tag is facing down, because that's like a stopper, which you probably can't really see there, but that little tag is designed to fit down in there, and then you can come along, insert that on, put your other side on. You need to screw it down into here first. Screw that through. Place your little cup on with the cup, so that little screw fits inside the cup and screws down inside here. I've got a screwdriver, so there's a little hole there. Poke through, screw that screw tight down into this threaded knob. Don't do it up so tight that you strip the thread, but you still want to do it up tight enough that it's not going to come undone. Screw that bracket onto your arm. So these short bolts go through, so insert the bolt through from this side. So these go onto the individual arms here. So slide your bolt through there, screw it up on the other side. Don't do it up too tight, and make sure that these are at the top. So I originally had the springs down on the bottom like it says in the instructions, but I found that they were sort of contacting with the bearing housings as the arm was lowered down. So I flipped them around, I put my turnbuckles down here. So just an observation I made when fitting these turnbuckles here. I originally had it fitted that way with the point of the hook near the bearing here, and it sort of blocks the head of the Allen screw there. So if you flip it around the other way here, it's only like a minor thing, but down the track you probably find that it's easier if you do need for some reason to adjust these. It would be easier to get your Allen wrench on there. Another point of observation with these springs, the turnbuckles, sorry, is if you have them around so they're sort of vertical, like if they're horizontal like that and these are tightened up more, they can actually hit up on the bearings themselves as well. So if you just rotate them around 90 degrees like that, you get more clearance. You pretty much have to unscrew these all the way out, and when you unscrew these, make sure you unscrew them evenly, so hook it onto something and unscrew it like so. And then I think the easy way to do it is hook it all up, get your little eyelet, lift this up. You probably want to screw these little stoppers with the black foam pads, screw them down so that you can get enough clearance and reach, and then that's ready to put the screw in there now and tighten up. Then obviously you can play with your adjustment here. I'd say you would put the screen in there to get the weight. I'm pretty sure all you basically want that to do is just to hold your screen up with your ink in it and your squeegee in it. So that's something you probably do last minute. Obviously these here to set the height. The next step I would do is these little gates here, I would fit them. What I found out was I had to push the gate in towards the carousel, because I actually had, when I lowered this down, the little tag was actually hitting on here, and it needs to be out a bit further to connect with these bearings, so down in the centre there. So that's the reason why I found I had to push them in. So that's the sort of process. Tighten that one, keep holding it out, tighten this other one. Once you've sort of got it in place, then you can put a wrench on the bottom, one on the top. The next step would be, once you get that bolted up, you would, I think I lowered the arm down so the tag's sitting in there. You're going to want to pinch these in because there's a bit of movement side to side. So you sort of want to pinch them in so they're tight around that gate, and then tighten them up. Make sure that they're still fairly free. Depending on the position of them, you can do them up and they just go tight. Then once you have one done, using the same arm, go ahead and do the same process. Align them all to the same arm. You might find some of them are slightly different. That's the way I would recommend doing it. Then once you get them adjusted, lower it down into there and just move this side to side. Make sure that there's no sideways movement, it should be solid. So you don't really want to tighten these up too tight, just have them loose until you get these gates in place. And what I did was lower it into a gate and then sort of let it settle in its happy place. You might, wiggle this a little bit if you need to. These bearings should settle into their natural position once you get this gate in place, and then you can go ahead and tighten these up. And once you do that, just double check that it's fairly free movement up and down, not restricted in any way. And then once you've done that, just check it in all your gates, make sure it's all fits in nicely into each gate. So one thing I've noticed I've done by mistake here is I've put this long section on this part that's extended out here. It should be this shorter one, so if I show you here, you'll notice that these legs are lined up. This piece is here, so you can see the difference in alignment there. So this one should be here, this one should be over here, and then you've got this other one here that's real short that doesn't have any of this on it, so it's just all plain. All your rest have these. Okay guys, so I finally got my my screen to sit flat on the pallet here. I actually had a lot of trouble getting to this point, more trouble than I anticipated. The other thing I noticed that I wasn't aware of when I was doing my previous test presses, there's actually a difference here in the pallets. So the screen is sitting up here, but down here it's, well, actually on the other side it's touching. Actually, I just noticed that there looks a bit twisted, slightly out there. This is so this part here, this tag is sitting up a bit higher on there. I mean, that's not really going to cause the issue that I'm having, but it does explain the reason why it's touching over this side and it's off here. But the only way I can think of to rectify this is to lift this up here, the pallet. So I'm thinking if I pull these two bolts out here and put some spacers under to lift this up, hopefully that is going to change this angle here. We come around to this one. So you'll notice these other ones, they've got the hole, like the big long, well, this one is the only one that has the long section. Probably the other side, opposite side to this, does as well. This one here is bolted on close to the carousel, but this one here is bolted a bit further away. So there's quite possibly some flex happening in these two bolts here, because if we drop this one down, notice it's sitting touching there, but down here it's really dropped away. So I thought about putting a brace down from under here somewhere down onto my frame on my table, a diagonal brace, and could either put some sort of adjustment bolt or something to raise it up, or just get it level right from the start. But I think what I'm going to do, I'm just going to put this other side one on, this other leg, and just turn this whole thing around like quarter of a turn and do away with this short leg here. So yeah, that's just another thing that you might want to be aware of and check when you're setting up your press. Okay, so I've got pretty much the same problem I had before. So on this one, it's good, sitting nice and flat. But around to this one, this is the new leg that I put on, so the single piece section here, and I've got the same problem that I was trying to correct in the first place. You can see the pallet is dropping down at the back here. So the other two that I've got set up are fine, but what I'm thinking, what I'm going to try and do is at this mounting point I'm going to slacken these bolts off, and if you can imagine, this is going to be the pivot point here. So if I can drop this down at the front here, that's going to raise this at the back. So I've did the adjustments that I was talking about. You'll notice might be a bit hard to see, but I'm right down as far as I can go on the hole. So with the restriction of the bolt and the hole, I am sort of slightly restricted here down at the bottom here. So I can only go down 2 mil, which will be pretty close. But what I need to do is drill this hole out here so that will allow this to drop down lower and get the angle that I want. So yeah, the size of this hole is a 10.5 mil. I'm going to try going 2 mils bigger, drill out both sides, and then yeah, see if that helps my positioning and the angle. So I've got the other side bolt slacked off, and you'll see if I lift the back up. A bit hard to see, but lift the back, that drops down. If I push down on the back, obviously that's going to lift it up. But yeah, I want to go right down as much as I can. Okay guys, so I've gone ahead, I've drilled out my holes, so I've screwed it back up. This tag down here is actually resting on this bottom part, so that's the limit basically of its travel downwards. As you can see, I've got this lined up. It's pretty good. It's 0.5 millimeter, if that, out at the back, but not enough to be an issue. So that's one less thing for me to stress over now. Yeah, I'm really happy I've got that sorted out. This is the other side. So yeah, it looks like a gap, but it's actually just a shadow there. It's actually sitting down flat all the way along. So if we double check this now. Bit of off contact there, but it's all flat. It's about as good as I'm going to get it. Same on this one. Pretty good. So the other thing I thought of doing, if anyone's got the same issues and they don't have a drill or whatever, is you could put a shim under here, like either a big flat washer or a piece of tin or something underneath, like between this leg and this bracket here, so wedge it in under there. Obviously that's, if you raise it at the back, it's going to change the angle at the front, so that's another option too. Okay, just one other observation I've made here. You'll notice with this other screen, it's hitting, it's probably a bit hard to see, but it's actually hitting on the other side all the way down. But on this side, it's got a big gap all along here. And what I've noticed is because my other screen's up there, all the weight's over that side. And if you're looking here at this carousel, if I press down on there, you'll notice this is closing this gap over here. So there's quite a bit of movement in there. So that's, yeah, I'm glad I found that, because I was scratching my head as to what was going on there. So what I'll even think about doing is just putting another screen in here, just an empty screen, just to try and balance the weight out. That's going to be the easiest sort of fix without pulling all this apart and trying to work something out with that. Which, I mean, it's only one bolt, so it quite possibly could be a solution. Something to look at, but yeah, I'm probably not going to worry too much about it. If worst comes to worst, I just got one of these clamps here. I just clamp that down there for each print. Obviously it's not ideal, it's just extra work, but it's just an option. Okay, there's a few different ways you can do it, a few different steps you can take. My advice would be with these platen brackets, screw all these in first, don't screw them all the way through. Next step, once you have all that done, get these little wood screws, screw the bracket into your platens. So I broke this bracket here, broke at the 2 spot welds. So one thing that might make it easier when you're going to line these platens up is put a line on the bottom side, and also measure out this, which is about 8 centimeters. I've just put a little scratch here to mark at the 4 centimeter mark, so I can get my center lined up at the back. Put a little mark here in the center of this receiver here, so I can line it up with the line on the top of the pallet here. So just one other couple of things I want to point out. So I originally had my pallets pushed right down, so the neck, top of the neck here was flush with the screen, but around on this other part here, you can see it's actually right up against this foot here, and you're not going to see it, but the screen was actually sitting here, not out here. The other problem with that too was when this was down, it was actually sitting, the receiver was sitting on the pallet, which is not ideal. So the only reason I sort of did that was because my design, so I wanted the seam of the collar to be off the platen, so down here somewhere, but the problem is my design, I want it to be about 4 or 5 fingers down, which my design is going to start here, so that's not going to work. So obviously what I'm going to have to do is my seam, because of where my design is going to sit, and to allow for enough space for the ink to sit, to be able to get behind it, to push it, my design is going to have to come down. Therefore, to get that same 4 fingers, my seam is going to have to be under the frame anyway. There's no real way around that. The other thing too is that the gap here, I've sort of gone for a little gap there, but for a t-shirt it's probably alright, there's enough gap. But once you put, say if you're doing a hoodie and you've got thick material sitting down in here, you're going to want to ensure there's enough clearance between the back of, like the bottom of your receiver, and the thickness of the material. Yeah, I'm going to move my pallet even further out. So just one last thing about setting up your pallet is, once you get one set up, get your distance right down here, you get it to where your design is going to be sort of in the right spot. What I would probably do, using the same screen, make sure you don't move it, is you could put a little mark on here, and then I measured the distance down to where that mark is, and then I put that same mark at the same measurement on all the pallets, and then that way I was able to bring the screen down, move my pallet, get it roughly into place, and then do the bolts up underneath. These bottom two, when you're adjusting them, these are basically the ones that you do up last, so leave them loose do them up snug and then back them off slightly. Probably either start at either one end, the top or the bottom. I started down at the bottom, or the closest end to the carousel. Once again, you want to be aiming for just a slight outwards bow on this bracket here all the way around when it's all done up. But essentially, yeah, you get it fairly close on one, like get it lined up at the bottom here, and then come up to your top one and do the same thing. You might need to fine tune it. You might find that once you do this one up, your other one will go out again. So it's best to just do small movements, like a eighth of a turn or something here. Come around, do the other side. When you get them fairly close to lined up, if you know you do this one up tight, you know that when you do this one up, and you can be up the top watching it, and then once you tighten this up and it lines up, you know you're done. And obviously once you've got that sorted, then do these ones up. So the final step would be to set your height here of your receiver. If you need off contact, you're going to have to raise that up a bit higher. If you're using plastisol inks, I'm using water-based, so I'm not going to have any off contact. So I've got one of my screens in here, and the other issue I had was, if you look here, so I've got quite a gap here, even though I've set my height up here of these to be, when that's down, I've set that to be flush or flat there when the screen's in it. But even having done that, I've still got this big off contact at the back here. And as we get down to the top of the shirt, it's actually up a bit on this side, but on this side you can see, so it's zero off contact there, so it's hitting there. But then as we get up here, we've got off contact, and I couldn't really work out why that was. I did actually just tighten it up, and then I got back here and I bent the screen up, which is probably not ideal because you can risk breaking your screen or breaking something else. But what I've sort of come to the conclusion that how I can possibly fix it is by raising the height of this stopper bolt here. So just assume that this is your head clamp here. So if I raise that stopper bolt, this is going to raise this up, which is going to change the angle. Obviously by doing that, then you're going to have to readjust this and drop this whole clamp down. But what that's going to do, I think, is because that's changing the angle, it's going to close this gap up and make it like consistent. So here I've got my screen in, raised my stopper bolt here. We've got more of an even gap all the way along here now. So now all I need to do is loosen these bolts off here and drop this whole thing down. So just if you want to get these consistent, what I did was measured it sort of at the bolt, hold that there, and then look at, it's a bit hard for you to see, but look at where the base of it is measuring to. Look at our measurement here on the inches. It was actually, previously it was like 2/16 of an inch back from the tan, so I've actually raised it by 1/16 of an inch, and that's sort of given me pretty good level across there. It's actually a bit different on this side of the screen to the other side. It's possibly the screen a bit out, which I've found that some of them are. So yeah, that's just the way I would measure it. Just consistently measure it in the one spot, so at the bolt or wherever you want to do it. Do that all the way around for all of your stations, and then go ahead and adjust the height up and down on these two bolts. What you want to be careful of is that if you go too high with this, it's going to raise this locator tag. Obviously the narrowest point is in the center of these two bearings here, right in the center. So if you go too high above that, then obviously you're going to get side to side movement, which is definitely what you don't want. So something to be mindful of. Here we are, we've gone and adjusted our height here. I've loosened these off, and now I've pushed down on here to drop this down. I would probably recommend putting a screen in, because I went around, so just to demonstrate on this one, I lined this bottom up to be flush here, but then I found when I put my screen in, it was sort of throwing it out of whack for some reason. So you'll notice now that pretty much got zero off contact, probably like, sort of see there, it's probably about a millimetre or less than a millimetre. Up here it's actually a little bit further, a little bit higher, but not enough for me to worry about. I mean, I was able to do those other prints and I had like 4mm gap up at the back here. So if I could do decent prints with that, this here is going to be so much better, I think. So yeah, that's just something I would recommend. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed the video, hope you got something out of it. Please like or subscribe, hit the bell if you want to see more content like this. Thanks guys.